There is something happening to you right now that you have not been able to name. You feel it when you are sitting in a room full of people and still feel completely invisible. You feel it when you pour everything you have into a relationship, a friendship, a job, and walk away feeling emptier than when you started. You feel it when you look in the mirror and wonder why the world treats you like you are background noise, when you know deep inside that you are anything but. That feeling has a name, and by the time this video is done, you are going to understand exactly what has been happening to you, why it keeps happening, and how to make it stop forever. Stay with me, because the next 11 minutes are going to rearrange something inside of you. If this channel has ever made you stop and think differently about yourself and your life, take 2 seconds right now and hit subscribe. There are no gimmicks here, no shortcuts. Just real strategy for people who are serious about changing how they move through the world. Subscribe, and let's get into this. Now, before we go any further, I want you to think about the loneliest moment of your life. Not the dramatic kind of lonely. Not the kind people write songs about. I mean, the quiet kind. The kind where you are surrounded by noise and activity, and yet you feel completely disconnected from all of it. Where you are physically present, but mentally, emotionally, somewhere else entirely. Where you wonder if anyone would even notice if you simply faded out of the room. Most people assume that feeling is a personal flaw. They think it means something is wrong with them. They go looking for solutions in all the wrong places. They try to be louder, more entertaining, more agreeable, more available. They pour more of themselves into the relationships and systems and environments that are already draining them dry. And the loneliness does not go away. It gets quieter for a while, then returns heavier than before. What nobody tells you is that the loneliness you are experiencing is not a sign of weakness. It is actually a signal. A very specific, very important signal that something in your life has been running completely backwards. And Niccolò Machiavelli, the man who spent his life studying power, human nature, and the mechanics of how people really treat each other, when the social masks come off, understood this signal better than almost anyone who has ever put their thoughts to paper. Machiavelli spent years in the courts of Florence, watching princes rise and fall. He watched brilliant men get destroyed and mediocre men ascend. He watched loyalty get rewarded with betrayal. He watched generosity get repaid with contempt. And after all of that observation, he arrived at a conclusion that most people spend their entire lives refusing to accept. The world does not reward the person who gives the most. It rewards the person who is valued the most. And value in human dynamics is almost never determined by how much you offer. It is determined by how rare your presence is, how controlled your energy is, and how little you need from the people around you. That is the root of the loneliness. You have been spending yourself freely. You have been accessible, available, responsive, generous with your time and your emotions and your presence. And the world has responded the way it always responds to abundance. It has taken you for granted. Think about how attention actually works in any human relationship. When something is everywhere, you stop noticing it, you stop valuing it. Water is essential to life, but you do not think twice about turning on a tap. Air keeps you alive every single second, but you are not consciously grateful for it right now. But the moment water becomes scarce, the moment the air gets thin, everything changes. Suddenly, that resource is all you can think about. Suddenly, it becomes the most important thing in the world. Your presence, your attention, your emotional engagement, these are resources. And like every resource that has ever existed in the history of the world, their value is determined by their scarcity. You have been treating yours like there is an infinite supply, and the people around you have responded accordingly. This is not a personal attack on who you are. It is an economic reality. It is as neutral and as inevitable as gravity. And the moment you stop fighting it and start working with it, everything changes. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable, because I want you to sit with something for a moment. Think about a relationship in your life, romantic, professional, social. Does not matter where you feel undervalued. Where you feel like you give more than you receive. Where you feel like you are always the one reaching out, Always the one making effort? Always the one showing up while the other person stays comfortably in place? Now ask yourself honestly, how available have you been to that person? How quickly do you respond when they reach out? How often do you show up even when they have not invited you? How many times have you explained yourself, defended yourself, justified yourself to them? How many times have you initiated when they did not? The pattern you are seeing is not a coincidence. You trained them. You did not mean to. But through your consistent availability, your consistent responsiveness, your consistent effort in the absence of reciprocal effort, you taught them exactly what your attention costs. And because you kept giving it freely, they learned that it costs nothing. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the danger of what he called overfamiliarity. The idea is simple. The more someone sees of you, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you become, the more ordinary you become in their perception. And the more ordinary you are, the less your presence means to them. You can be the most extraordinary person in the room, but if you're always in the room, you eventually blend into the walls. This is why the people who seem to command the most respect, the most desire, the most interest from those around them are almost never the most available ones. They are the ones whose presence you have to earn, the ones who do not come running when called, the ones who seem to exist in their own orbit, independent and complete, regardless of whether you are paying attention to them or not. And here is the paradox that Machiavelli understood deeply. It is the person who appears to need nothing who ends up having everything offered to them, because the human mind is wired to want what it cannot easily have, and to dismiss what it can have at any time. You are alone right now, or at some version of alone, and I want you to understand something important. That aloneness is not your punishment. It is your invitation. It is the universe clearing a space for you to do something that most people never do, which is to stop running from the quiet and start understanding what it is actually telling you. The people who have changed their lives most dramatically are almost never the ones who stayed constantly in motion, constantly social, constantly stimulated. They are the ones who found a way to be still long enough to hear themselves think, to sit with the discomfort of their own company until it stopped being uncomfortable, to rebuild from the inside out instead of reaching outward for validation, to fill a gap that no amount of external approval can actually touch. If you are watching this alone tonight, I want you to hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. There is something that has been running wrong around you, a pattern of how you have been engaging with the world. And that pattern can be changed, not through force, not through performance, but through a quiet, deliberate shift in how you value yourself. Leave a comment right now. Tell me, in one sentence, a relationship where you feel undervalued. You do not have to name anyone. Just describe the feeling. Because when you put it into words, you start to take back some of the power you have been giving away. Now let's go deeper, because identifying the problem is one thing. Understanding the mechanism is another entirely. When Machiavelli studied the courts of Florence, he noticed something that seemed almost counterintuitive. The most powerful men in those courts were rarely the loudest. They were rarely the most visibly enthusiastic or emotionally expressive. They were the ones who moved through chaos with a kind of deliberate stillness. The ones who could sit across from an enemy and offer nothing but a calm, measuring silence. The ones who understood that in any interaction, the person who reacts is the person who reveals. And the person who reveals has handed the other person a roadmap to their vulnerabilities. We live in a culture that treats emotional expressiveness as a virtue, and it can be. But there is a version of expressiveness that is not authenticity. It is exposure. It is handing strangers and rivals and people who have not earned your trust a complete picture of every button you have, every fear you carry, everything that can be used to destabilize you. And once someone has that picture, consciously or not, they will use it, not always out of malice. Sometimes just out of the basic human instinct to push on things and see what happens. Strategic stillness is not the same thing as coldness. It is not suppression. It is not building walls around yourself to keep everyone out. It is the development of a kind of internal anchor, a place inside yourself that does not move when the winds outside are pushing hard. It is the ability to observe what is happening around you with enough distance to choose your response, rather than simply react to what you feel. And here is the thing about that kind of stillness. It does not just protect you, it transforms how other people experience you. When someone is used to getting a reaction from you and suddenly they cannot, something shifts in them. The dynamic changes. They become uncertain, they become curious. They become, often without fully understanding why, more interested in you than they were before. Not because you have become cold or detached, but because you have become harder to read. And things that are harder to read feel more significant, more worth paying attention to, more deserving of effort. There is a concept in psychology called intermittent reinforcement. It is the same principle that makes slot machines so compelling. When a reward is completely predictable, it loses its power to motivate. But when a reward is unpredictable, when you never quite know when it is coming or whether it is coming at all, the pull toward it becomes almost irresistible. This is not manipulation in the cynical sense. It is simply how human motivation actually works. And understanding it is not about using people. It is about understanding why the way you have been showing up has been working against you. When you are completely predictable in your availability, when everyone around you knows that you will always respond, always show up, always be there regardless of how they treat you, you have accidentally removed yourself from the category of things worth pursuing. You have made yourself a given, and people do not work to keep what they consider a given. They only notice it when it disappears. This is why one of the most powerful things you can do right now, tonight, starting from this moment, is to begin reclaiming your own time and attention as if they are finite and precious, because they are. You have a limited number of hours, a limited amount of emotional energy, and every hour and every unit of that energy you spend in spaces that drain you, with people who do not value what you bring, on reactions and explanations and justifications that no one asked for. That is time and energy that is not going toward building the version of your life that actually reflects who you are. Machiavelli wrote that a wise ruler must be willing to be feared before he can afford to be loved. And while that sounds harsh taken out of context, what he was actually pointing to is the importance of being taken seriously, of having your limits respected, of occupying your space in the world in a way that signals to others that your presence has weight, that your attention has value, that access to you is something to be earned and not simply assumed. Most people who feel invisible do not feel invisible because they are not interesting or valuable or worthy of connection. They feel invisible because they have made themselves so available that no one has had to work to see them. And when you do not have to work for something, you tend not to appreciate it even when it is extraordinary. Like this video, if any of this is landing for you. And share it with someone you think needs to hear it. Not because I need the numbers, but because this is the kind of content that can actually shift something in a person, if they hear it at the right moment. Now I want to talk about something that does not get discussed enough when people talk about loneliness and isolation and the feeling of being undervalued. And that is the internal dimension. Because everything we have talked about so far has been about how you show up in the world relative to other people. But there is another battle happening, and it is the one inside your own head. You have a voice that has been running in the background of your life for decades. A voice that sounds like you, but is actually made up of the accumulated opinions and criticisms and expectations of everyone who has ever had influence over you. Your parents, your early peers, the culture you were raised in, the relationships that shaped your ideas about what love and respect are. That voice tells you things. It tells you that you need to be more, that you are not quite enough as you are, that other people's approval is the measure of your worth, that if someone pulls away from you, it is because there is something fundamentally wrong with you, that silence and solitude are punishments rather than gifts. And as long as that voice is running the show, none of the external strategies matter. You can learn every social dynamic there is. You can understand exactly why people respond to scarcity and stillness. But if the voice inside your own head is constantly dragging you back to needing validation, to seeking approval, to measuring your worth by how much external warmth you can generate from others, you will keep falling back into old patterns. Machiavelli talked about the concept of fortuna, which he described as the unpredictable force of circumstance that shapes the world around us. And he argued that the only way to not be completely at the mercy of fortuna was to develop virtue, which was not virtue in the moral sense, but more like inner strength, competence, the capacity to act with intention, rather than simply react to whatever the moment brings. He believed that a person with genuine inner strength could shape at least half of their own destiny, even in the most chaotic of circumstances, and a person without it would be swept away by every shift of the wind. Your internal voice is fortuna. It is the unpredictable, often irrational force that throws you off course internally, the way external circumstances throw you off course externally. And the only answer to it is the same answer Machiavelli prescribed for external chaos. You build something inside yourself that is stronger. You develop an internal foundation that does not shift based on how someone treats you on a given day. You cultivate a relationship with your own judgment and your own values and your own sense of direction that is not dependent on being ratified by the people around you. This sounds abstract, so let me make it concrete. The next time you feel the pull to reach out to someone who has not been reciprocating your energy, pause. Not forever. Just pause. Sit with the discomfort of the impulse without acting on it immediately. Ask yourself whether reaching out is coming from genuine desire and care or whether it is coming from anxiety, from a need to confirm that you still exist in their reality, from a fear that the silence means something terrible about your worth. If it is the latter, do not reach out yet. Do it as an act of honesty with yourself, because every time you act from anxiety, you reinforce to your own nervous system the idea that the anxiety was justified. And every time you sit with the discomfort and choose differently, you build something. You build evidence that you can trust yourself, that you can tolerate uncertainty, that you are not going to collapse just because someone's attention has shifted. That is the beginning of real inner strength. And real inner strength is the only thing that makes any of the external dynamics work in a sustainable way. Because if you are only practicing scarcity as a strategy, if you are only being still because you heard it makes people more interested in you, it will leak. People, especially perceptive people, can feel the difference between someone who is genuinely grounded in themselves and someone who is performing groundedness. The performance does not hold under pressure. The real thing does. Let's take a moment. Think about what you were doing 5 years ago. What were you spending your attention on? What were you reacting to? Worried about chasing? And then ask yourself honestly, how much of that actually mattered? The honest answer for most people is that an enormous amount of what felt urgent 5 years ago turned out to be completely inconsequential. The drama dissolved. The opinions that felt like they determined your worth turned out not to. The urgencies that felt impossible to ignore were optional. Machiavelli believed in the ability to take the long view, to ask in 5 years, will this matter? And to give yourself permission to stop feeding the things that will not. The things that will matter in 5 years are the things you are building right now, while everyone else is distracted by noise. The skills you are developing, the habits you are forming, the relationships built on genuine reciprocity, rather than habit or codependence. Machiavelli was exiled from Florence. He was stripped of his position, his influence, everything he had spent years building. And in that exile, in that profound and forced solitude, instead of spending his energy trying to win back what he had lost, he wrote, he studied, he thought. He produced the work that would eventually make him one of the most read and studied thinkers in the history of Western civilization. The princes who exiled him are footnotes. His ideas are still being discussed 500 years later. His exile, his aloneness, his loss of external status, it turned out not to be his undoing. It turned out to be the crucible in which his most important work was forged. He just had to stop fighting the solitude long enough to use it. Drop a comment right now and tell me, if you had 6 months of genuine solitude, 6 months where no one was watching, no one was judging, no one's opinion was in the equation, what would you spend it building? What would you actually do? Because the life you just described in that answer, that is your direction. That is your signal. And everything that has been pulling you away from it, every relationship that drains rather than builds, every environment that diminishes rather than expands, every habit of attention that keeps your eyes on the noise instead of the mission, those are the things worth ignoring. Now I want to address something sitting in the back of some minds right now. Whenever we talk about withdrawal, about pulling back, about being less available and less reactive, there is a very understandable concern. Does this make me cold? Does it make me disconnected? Does practicing strategic stillness mean closing myself off from genuine connection? The answer is no. But only if you understand the distinction between strategic restraint and emotional deadness, between controlled presence and having no capacity to feel at all. Strategic restraint means you are selective. It means you have standards for where your attention goes. It does not mean you distrust people by default. It means trust and investment are earned over time through demonstrated care and reciprocity, not assumed the moment someone shows up. This selectivity does not make you cold. It makes you more capable of genuine connection because the connections you do allow in have room to breathe and deepen in ways that would not be possible if you were spreading your energy thin across dozens of superficial ties that exist more out of anxiety than real affinity. You cannot be fully anything when you are partially everything, and the fear of being alone drives many people to spread themselves so thin that they end up being fully nothing to anyone, including themselves. Machiavelli believed that a leader's most important quality was the ability to decide, to make a clear choice and stand behind it without being paralyzed by the need for universal approval. And that ability, that willingness to choose this and not that, this person and not that one, this direction and not the comfortable but directionless drift, that is what creates a life that actually means something. The most alive you will ever feel is when you are moving with intention towards something that matters to you. Not when you are keeping everyone happy. Not when you are managing everyone's perception of you. Not when you are being careful not to be misunderstood. When you are moving with clarity toward what you actually care about and allowing the people and things that align with that direction to come with you while releasing the ones that do not. That is not loneliness. That is freedom. If this is resonating with you, share this video. Send it to someone who is in that place right now, that quiet, heavy place of feeling undervalued and unseen. Because sometimes the most useful thing you can do for someone you care about is put something in front of them that names what they have been feeling. Now here is where I want to bring it home, because we have covered a lot of ground. We have talked about the economics of attention, about Machiavelli's observations on power and familiarity and the cost of overexposure, about the internal dynamics that keep people trapped in patterns of giving more than they receive, about the difference between strategic restraint and emotional absence, and about the connection between solitude and the kind of purposeful building that actually changes a life. But all of that means nothing if it stays abstract. So I want to give you something concrete. Something you can do today, not someday, not when you have figured everything out, but today. The first thing is this: audit your attention. Not your time, your attention. Think about where your attention actually goes in the course of a day. What are you reacting to? Whose opinion are you mentally rehearsing arguments against? Whose approval are you waiting for? Write it down. Just get honest about it. Because what you are going to find is that a significant portion of your mental and emotional energy is going to people and situations that are not building anything for you. They are just loud or urgent or familiar enough to keep demanding your attention without giving anything real back. Once you can see that clearly, you can begin to redirect. Not all at once. You just need to begin making different choices. To notice the pull toward the noise and make a deliberate decision, just this once, to turn back toward the signal, toward the work, toward the quiet that has something to teach you. The second thing, set one standard this week. Think of one situation in your life where you have been accepting treatment that you would not accept if you genuinely valued your own energy, and decide on one quiet, firm response to that behavior if it happens again. Not a confrontation, not a dramatic declaration, just a simple action that reflects the standard you are setting for yourself. You do not need to announce it. You do not need anyone's permission. You just need to do it. And then notice how it feels when you act from your own values rather than from anxiety about what someone else is doing. The third thing, choose one block of time this week and use it on something that is building toward the life you actually want. Creating, thinking, practicing, building. Something that moves the needle on the version of yourself you described when I asked what you would do with 6 months of solitude. Treat that time as non-negotiable. Not because it will change everything overnight, but because the habit of protecting it is what eventually changes everything. Machiavelli did not build his legacy in one afternoon. He built it word by word, thought by thought, turning his intelligence toward what mattered rather than toward bitterness about what he had lost. You have more to work with than you think. You are more than the version of yourself that has been shrunk by the wrong environments and the wrong relationships and the wrong habits of attention. You always have been. And the quiet, the aloneness, the sense of not quite fitting into the noise around you, that was never the problem. That was always the invitation. This channel, The Silent Strategist, exists for the people who have felt that and who are ready to understand what to do with it. If you have watched this far, you are one of those people. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Leave a comment with what you are taking from this today. Like the video if it moved something in you. Share it if you know someone who needs to hear it. The world is loud. You do not have to be. Walk in silence, build in silence, and let the results speak for you.